Hi folks, and welcome back to the channel. Here today, we're here to start part 2 of the Victa Go Kart restoration project. We picked up this Go Kart, it hadn't operated for 25 years, and we've taken it through, we've stripped it down in part 1, we've fixed a couple of issues that we found, welded up the frame, with the braking system was locking up. You can see that spinning there freely, but if I apply the brakes, it now comes off and allows it to spin. So that's all sorted. We sourced a good running Victa 2-stroke 125 with a pull start that works, got that running. So really now today, we're all about starting the reassembly process. So we'll start by flipping it over, getting the floor reinstalled. Then we'll probably move on to get the dash panel. They had that switch that hadn't been used in a long time. We'll get some wiring back to the engine, get the engine installed, get the wheels on. Let's see if we can get this completely reassembled and running in this video. So let's get into it. So to get the floor back on, I'm just going to use these pop rivets, and we'll probably just start our way at the top and then work our way around. Down at the front, it had some larger screws that didn't actually come out of the frame. So when I get down there, I'll probably have to flex it over a little bit and maybe drill some additional holes or work something out. But I'm just going to start at the back anyway, work my way around, and we'll get this pop riveted on and good to go. So just start here and get this first one in. It's pretty simple. There we go. You can see that's holding nicely. And then we'll just probably come down here and get one on a bit of a diagonal on so that we can actually then get it all pretty much in alignment. Doing my best to reuse the previous holes. So like I say, if we do it on a diagonal, everything should actually line up fairly well. Alright, so we've got that floor nicely pop riveted back on. I made a bit of a mess over here on this side. I think that's a double thickness of tubing as it comes in on that upper edge. So I've just got a couple of pop rivets there, and over this side, I've got a couple in there just to get it nice and secure, but pretty happy with that. I think what we'll do before we flip it back over, let's get the front wheels back on. Now I pumped these up the other day, and you can see these have held their pressure really well, so really happy with that. So we'll get these back on. I've also greased the bearings, and I just did that. There's a little grease nipple on the inside here, and I was able to pump grease in there, see the grease coming through those bearings. So we've got them greased up. Let's get the front wheels back on now. So there you go, folks. Front wheels are on. She's starting to come together. Greased up those bearings, and just look how well they're spinning now. So let's get into the rest of it. Let's get it flipped back up the other way. I won't put the rear wheels on until we've actually got the motor on, but we'll put it up on its little stand and we'll keep the reassembly process going. So pretty happy with the Go Kart, how that's coming together. Found the old panel that came out. So it would have been mounted up in there like that under the steering wheel. You can see it's got a really faint off and on. I'll zoom in closer so you can actually see that. And you can actually also see that the wiring, it actually just earths to the back of the plate. Obviously relying then on an earth through the chassis to the engine. As I said before though, what I'm thinking is I'm actually gonna just rely on a twisted pair to run all the way back to the motor. So got this old cord here. It's probably not overly thick. However, when you look at the ignition wires that typically come out of a Victa 2-stroke, they're not very thick at all. And all they're doing is grounding out the coil to stop the spark running. So it's probably going to be good enough, but we'll cut it open. We'll have a look at the actual thickness we've got here. It's just really nice that it's in one black sheath, as you can see. But first of all, what we'll actually do is we'll test the this old switch. I kind of like the old school look, but we'll test that the actual switch is still working with our multimeter. So we've got our switch, we've got our multimeter, so we've got it in the continuity test position. Let's just test getting a solid beep out of our multimeter. So I come around to the switch, we've got the on and the off position. So we've got it clearly in the off position. That's where it's going to close the contact and ground out the coil. And let's just test that we've actually got some continuity coming through the switch. There we go. And if we flick that switch off the other way and back on, there we go. So perfect, we've got a good working switch. So having confirmed the operation of the switch, let's have a look at this cable which I found out in the shed. And let's have a look at the wires in that. Let's see if this will be up to the task. So I just separate that out a little bit. And let's just strip some of that wire off there. So I think personally, looking at that, we've got a decent amount of copper. You can see the amount of thickness coming through there out of those two wires. And you can really see by comparison to what's on there, it really didn't have much thicker originally. But as I said, we're going to run it on both sides and run our twisted pair. And the convenience is we've got this lovely black sheath which will just cable tie along the frame. So it looks like we've got that switch sorted. So really happy there. Excellent. So really happy with the way that's coming along, cable tying along there. However, I'm not going to continue cable tying because I kind of want to have some options. I'm thinking once we get the engine on, I might actually just come up along the back of that seat rest there and then put the seat in on top. So we've got that cable up there. However, I have just discovered, I think this switch is faulty after all. I'll just show you with the multimeter down on this end. So wedge in my thumb in there between the two leads, flicking that switch, it's got continuity regardless. I did try to test it before we actually assembled it, but as you can see, that switch has actually gone permanently in the closed position. So I'm going to go hunt around in the shed. Let's see if we can find another switch that'll actually fit and do the job. All right, folks, so I found this other toggle switch. It's a 12-volt switch, something like 20 amps. So that's going to be more than sufficient to act as a kill switch. So found that in the shed. So let's just check it with our multimeter once again and chuck it on each side there. So straight away we can hear the continuity. Flick that switch back the other way and it's off. Now, best part about this is it's actually got spade connectors, which is going to be easier to do that wiring on. So just be able to push that on like that, and that's really firm. So just check once again that the closed position will be that orientation. So just get that on there. Yep. So let's get that in the correct orientation straight away. So the closed contact is in the off position as indicated on the little panel there. So slide that in underneath like that and just do that top nut up. Just a little bit fiddly there. There we go. Chuck that on there. Then pop that spade connector on. Crimp that down. Really nice and tight there. And do the same for the other one, just double it over the same, just like we did there. So we've got heaps of contact in there. And crimp that one down as well. And then simply plug them on to that switch. So then once again, let's test the continuity down at this end. So let's grab the end of that. Just put a contact either side. So So we can hear that's going now. Off. There we go, perfect. So engine off, got solid continuity and in the run position. Perfect, so let's move on. So let's cut off those excess cable ties around the place. So looking at the pull starter, that's for the engine that we're going to put on this Go Kart. Let's see if we can get off this switch which somebody else had jerry-rigged onto this at some stage and see if we can actually get that undone. I'm not sure about my chances, to be honest. It feels pretty tight, but let's just give it a go anyway, because I'd like to get it off. We're certainly not using that switch. Doesn't feel like it wants to go at all, but let's just give that another go. All right, so we're actually just getting that, so let's just get that all the way off now. There we go, managed to get that switch off. Now importantly, you can see they just earthed one side out straight into the bolt hole, which would have gone in to hold the cover, but onto the engine block. So they would have just earthed that into there like that. So make sure we don't lose that bolt, or literally just screw that into the side of the engine. So we just need to short the wire coming from the coil to the engine block. But one of the things when we're starting it, doesn't always seem to retract. So just gonna see if we can lubricate the spring. Got a bit of the old Inox MX3, so let's just squirt a bit of that onto that spring. Might just pull it out a little bit, get a bit more of that into that spring. You can see straight away so you can see straight away a little bit of that inox. Don't need much, just enough to lubricate that spring that it's now winding back. So next, let's have a look at the chain. Now, it was pretty rough, but I've had it soaking in WD-40 for a few days, just to see if it'll loosen up some of the links. And you can see it's still got a few stiff links. Some of them are a lot better. So let's just work our way through with the pliers. Let's just see if we can free up the stiff links that it does have still. Like I said, it's been soaking in this WD-40 for a few days now, so let's just see what we can do. See if we can get, some of these links to free up. So after some more soaking, check out this chain. We've freed up every single link on this chain now, and look at that. That is just running perfectly, that chain. You really can't complain. Now, I'm thinking that the old school quality of this chain, it doesn't actually look worn, it's just a little bit rusty, and we've got it all freed up now. But I'm actually thinking the old school quality is probably actually far better than anything we can buy today anyway. And it'd just be the hassle of getting the right size chain, the number of links. There's not even a joiner. This chain was made perfect size for this go-kart, so really happy with that. So let's get on to having a look at the engine mounts and see if we can get that engine mounted up. So we've got the engine mounted up and I'm pretty happy with the way it's looking. It's bolted in as I expected, but one of the things I just want to double check is the alignment of the sprockets, that they're actually completely vertically aligned. So I'll bring you around and let's get a ruler in there and just check the alignment of those sprockets so we know that we've got the engine set up correctly for the axle. So I just want to check the alignment of these two sprockets, and if we get this steel ruler
And if we just hold that off the mounting bracket, we can just gauge that the distance is just less than a ruler width there. And if we bring it up here, we can see, and just slide it down, it's just less than a ruler width up here as well. So I think we're absolutely spot on with the alignment of these two sprockets.
So now that we've got the engine mounted up, let's get the rear wheels back on. So it's actually starting to look like a go-kart, importantly, but so I can also move it around easily. So we had this little piece of washer there, let's get that on. We had the key to go in the axle. Let's just give the axle a bit of a squirt with some lubricant. You saw how hard it was to get off, but now that it's come off and a little bit of cleaned up, I do expect it's just going to slide on quite easily. So we'll get the key lined up and slide this wheel on. There we go. That lubricant probably certainly helped there. And just get a little bit onto the threads there. And let's spin that on. And we'll use our impact, we'll just spin him on. So what a world of difference just putting the rear wheels back on, really starting to come together, folks. Let's get now all of this insulation tape that I put on the carburetor, on all of those little holes. Let's get all of that off. I put that on, you saw before in part 1, just to stop getting any paint into the carburetor. So get all this off and let's start having a look at the ignition system onto the Victa 125 here. So just looking at how we're going to run this twisted pair back to that ignition switch. Originally I thought I'd come up the back of the seat frame, but just looking at the setup now, what I think I'll do is I'll run that along the bottom of the frame, underneath the engine like that. We've just got enough length then to come up around. One side can go obviously to the ignition coil there, and the other side can straight go onto the engine block, and that'll be really neat. We won't have any mess of wires coming across the top, getting close to the head, which is hot. Something I also have noticed is somebody has just broken off a spark plug and screwed it into the decompressor port hole. And you can see on this carburetor where the vacuum inlet would be on the inlet side of the manifold to hook up to the decompressor valve. They've just blocked that off there. Now, I've had a hunt around because it would be nice to be able to start the engine more easily. This is a decompressor off of a later model Power Torque Victa engine, but what I think is it needs to have a slightly longer shaft for these early Victa 125s, because you can see it's going to interfere with the head when it's screwed all the way in. So for now, we're going to leave that decompressor port blocked off with that bit of a spark plug, because we saw we fired up the engine and it was running fine anyway. It just makes it a little bit harder to pull that pull starter. It's probably a little bit harder on the actual pull start mechanism itself, but you know what, for the amount of times we're going to use it at this stage, let's just get it running, fully assembled, and we can worry about putting a proper decompressor back onto this engine later on. So for now, I'm just going to get this wired up. So we've got that ignition kill switch hooked up, and we'll get that starter mounted back on. So I'm just going to solder the joint where the kill switch wire goes directly to the ignition coil. And in the spirit of using what we got lying around the place, I don't have any small black heat shrink, so I'm just going to use red heat shrink to shrink down, and I'll put a slightly larger black one over the top, which we can then shrink down over the red. So we've got black. So we've got that soldered up and we've got the heat shrink pulled down over the solder. So let's just melt that down with the heat gun. The red one first. See, that's gone down nicely. And then we'll just slide the black one down over the top. And that's just going to make it look really neat. Also give it that double layer of protection where we did that joint on that solder joint. So just melt that right down there.
It's looking really good there. And then we should be able to get the starter back on. And when we bolt the starter back on, I've just stripped off that bare wire. We'll just ground that out onto the side of the engine block with the bolt. That's how it was set up with the switch that actually wasn't working on this original engine. So let's get that starter back on. Have to take off these bolts at the top. Nuts, I should say. So let's get that on the top first. And then we'll come around here. There we go. And just bend that wire around there, around the bolt for the starter, just like that. Should be the go. And get one in on around this side. There we go. And the ones on the top. So having gone to the effort now to wire up the switch, to kill the spark, to switch off the engine, let's just actually test now. I've popped my spark plug out. I've got my lead on which grounds out the spark plug. So let's test if we've actually got spark. So put the switch in the on position and then we'll pull the handle around here and yep, you can see it's got spark and straight away the clutch actually wants to grab. So probably why you need that little dolly. But now let's switch it to the off position there and we'll pull that again and straight away you can see it's got no spark now. So really happy folks that we've got that switch set up now and ready to go. So there you go folks, we've got the wheels on, we've got the engine mounted, we've got the ignition switch actually working, and isn't this Victa powered go-kart actually looking mean? I'm really happy with how it's turning out so far, and I will say if you've made it this far through the video, do consider joining the channel as a member. I've got a couple of levels, they're really cheap folks. And if you join up and be a member, I'll prioritise answering your questions, and also I'm putting up a fair bit of behind the scenes content which is only for channel members, so you can see a bit of the inner workings and a little bit of previews of videos of what's going on around the place. But anyway, I'm going to call this at this point for this video. So there's going to be a 3-part series. Part 2 is what we see here. Part 3, we'll get the fuel sorted. I want to get a little square fuel tank up here. We'll feed that down. We need to get the seat in, get the throttle hooked up and just tidy it up. And then it's time for a test drive. But if you have liked the video, give us a like and drop us a comment down below. It's truly appreciated. And in the future, if you're interested in learning about DIY maintenance and repairs, on the channel we do a bunch of things around the home. We do a bunch of lawnmower repairs, maintenance, restorations, and also we do some automotive content. On the channel we've got the Mercedes, the Audi A3, the Mazda 3, the early Ford Falcon, Toyota Corolla, little Holden Brina. So there's something in there for everyone. But until next time, have a good evening folks.